Hi everyone, welcome back to Planet Dirt. My name is Alicia and this is the next episode. I think we're on episode 4 of the Nevada Native Plant series. So last time we talked about some of the common nuisance weeds that are in northern Nevada. I have literally all of them in my backyard. And today we're going to talk about weed prevention and management, things that you can do throughout the seasons. So while on this very educational journey that I've been taking, I learned that timing is something that I really struggle with, and it's honestly one of the most important parts of weed management. And I apologize, I'm like trying to find the light where it's not like smacking me right in the eyeballs here. But it's not just about what you do, it's about when you do it. And a lot of the weed management suggestions that I found for my area specifically were about when you plant your stuff, when you seed, and keeping on pulling very early on in the season, which I struggle with literally all of those things. So if you've heard me talk about my climate before, it is very dry here. It goes from very cold in the winter to very hot in the summer very quickly. We don't have very long shoulder seasons. We have maybe 2 weeks of actual spring and maybe 2 weeks of actual fall. So that means that when I should be doing all of this stuff to my lawn, I'm a gardener. I'm more focused on starting my food crops for the season in the spring than I am with taking care of my lawn and aerating it and reseeding it, right? And in the fall, I am more concerned and occupied, I should say, with preserving food and making sure that everything's harvested and cleaning up my garden and prepping for the fall garden and doing all of these things for my actual food garden than I really am about taking care of these weed situations, which it turns out has been my downfall, because if you do all of these things and you manage the weeds at the right time, then it can help you not have to deal with these issues as much during the actual growing season, which is something that I do have to deal with a lot during the season. So this bed right behind me, I've talked about a lot. It has bindweed. I'll put up a picture. It has bindweed all throughout it. It's a big old mess. It's been there since we moved in, and it just completely takes over. So the issue with that is that it's my perennial bed. I have things like blueberries and blackberries, and some of these things are really aggressive growers, and they don't care. My blackberries, they laugh at the bindweed. They're like, I don't care if you're growing up me. I don't care. I'm going to keep growing and growing an insane amount. Blueberries do not like to compete with literally anything. And so the second the bindweed comes up and starts wrapping around it, the plant starts struggling. And I got literally one handful of blueberries this year because I didn't get on it early in the season like I should have. So all of that is to say, let's talk about weed prevention. All right, big picture stuff. Weeds follow seasonal patterns just like your food garden does. So some of them really like hot weather, some of them prefer cool weather. But the thing is, if you don't know what you're looking at and you only pull it after it's gone to seed, then you waited too long and the issue is just going to persist. So we're going to talk a little bit today about when you should be pulling things and things you can do in certain seasons to help you the next year. So one example I think of here is how much I have 2 sons. One of them loves running around the yard and finding the dandelions, the white fluffy ones, after they've already matured to their seed state. He loves finding those and like blowing on them like we did when we were kids, right? It's just a fun thing to do. But if you let them get to that stage when they're light and fluffy, and then someone's blowing the seeds all over the place, all of those seeds are going to scatter, and the problem is just going to persist. So the best time to pull dandelions is when the flowers are still yellow, or before they even develop flowers in the first place. That one's a tough one for me because they blend in really well. And so what I have been doing over the past couple of weeks, it's very recent. I'm not even going to pretend like I'm really good at managing dandelions. But what I've started doing is when I'm mowing the lawn and I see a yellow flower, I immediately go and I get Mr. Grandpa's tool. I'll put up a picture of it because I can't remember the actual name of this tool. I think it's Grandpa's something. I don't know. Grandpa's weeder. I don't know. But it does work really well for pulling out dandelions, especially when they're small. The bigger they are, the harder they're going to be to pull out, which again, this goes back to staying on top of things and regular maintenance. But whenever I see a yellow flower, that's my signal to know I need to go and pull that sucker before before those flowers turn white and fluffy and they just spread seed all over my yard. I will say that the dandelions are less bad in my yard than they have been in the past. And I think that is because I have been getting slightly better at seeding my grass every spring and making sure that, the lawn itself has a fighting chance. I have also helped smother it out with clover. Clover grows really, really quickly, and it needs a little less water and it's a little less finicky to actually germinate than grass. Therefore, I'm using that to my advantage. I'm putting it everywhere. I don't mind. I don't mind the clover everywhere. People say it's a weed. It was on my list from last time just because I have a ton of it, but I did intentionally put that in my yard. So, surprise, surprise, spring is the time that we really need to be focusing on weed management. It's when everything starts germinating from over the winter. Things like cheatgrass and foxtail and prickly lettuce. All of these things germinate in the spring and they grow really quickly. So things that you can do, they mentioned pre-emergent herbicides and early pulling. I am a big fan of early pulling. I don't like spraying things in my yard just because I do grow a lot of food and I don't want anything that could potentially touch the thing that I'm putting in my body. So I don't like to spray a lot of things, which incidentally is probably why I have a big issue with weeds. But hey, I do a lot of early pulling, and coming this fall, I will also be doing a lot of smothering. I have been saving my cardboard. I'm going to put down cardboard in a lot of places and then mulch on top of it. I will put a link to a short we just made. We just pruned back our chokecherry tree in the back corner of our property. It was getting really big and out of hand, and half of it was dead. I hope we did it in time. But from that, I'm going to get a lot of wood chip mulch, and I'm going to cardboard and then wood chip mulch a lot of things at the end of this fall. So spring is when you have to focus on pulling and using herbicides if you so choose to do. But in the fall is when you can think about doing things like smothering out seeds before they even germinate. All right, summer is a little bit different, and a lot of the weeds that thrive in summer are actually thriving because of overwatering. That's not really an issue in my yard. I have a lack of water issue, but one of the things that they said is that if you are having issues with weeds, make sure you're monitoring your water to make sure you're not giving your soil too much, that it's stressing out your grass and allowing room for other weeds to grow as well. If you're using herbicides in the summer, this is the time for post-emergence. So pre-emergence target seeds and weeds before they have actually germinated. Post-emergence are for after they have germinated and they are starting to grow. So that's what you would use in the summer. Like I said, I don't like to spray things in my yard. But a lot of the things that I'm dealing with, I did it to myself, or I just kind of don't care that it's there. In my lawn, I think a lot of the advice that I'm reading on lawn care is really about if you want to have a perfect, pristine grass lawn, and that's really not my goal. So all of this advice is really going to differ based on the goals of your area, and so take it with a grain of salt, apply what works for you. All right, so we talked a little bit about what to do in the fall, but what I will be doing in the next couple of weeks, which I have never done in the fall before, is aerating my lawn and overseeding it in the fall. I usually do this in the spring, and I realized when I was doing all of this research that it's probably not when I should be doing it for my climate. Like I said, we don't have big shoulder seasons here. We go from cold to hot, hot to cold very quickly. And so when I seed things in the spring, I think that's why I have big clover patches in my front yard and not a lot of grass. It's because clover is not as finicky. It's a lot more forgiving than grass seed is. So what I'm planning on doing is overseeding and aerating for grass in the fall, and that way hopefully it will be a little bit more moist and it's not going to be getting perpetually hotter and hotter. It will be perpetually getting colder and colder. Hopefully that's a little bit more tolerable of an environment for grass seed. At least, fingers crossed, that's the hope. All right, I notably did not talk about winter because here pretty much everything's done in the winter. But it does get quite cold here. It does snow a lot. I shouldn't say a lot. We are still a desert. But it does snow often here. At least every couple of weeks we'll get at least a little bit of snow. And but winter is a good time for planning, for making sure that you are ready when spring does come, and planning out your time so that you have time, like I will need to have time, to both start seeds and do planning for my food garden, but also taking care of the spots in my yard that are not food. A lot of what I'm going to focus on this winter is flowers and trying to get my lawn up. I was joking with my brother that if I can't get my lawn to grow actual grass this upcoming spring, I'm just going to start some giant pumpkins and stick the starts right next to where the sprinklers are in my front yard. And then I'm just going to have a big giant pumpkin patch in my front yard. And that's just what's going to happen because it looks absolutely awful and I'm tired of looking at it. And it's pretty finicky. So I don't know. If nothing else, if nothing works, then I have a plan, you guys, and it's called pumpkins. That's my plan. One other thing I will note about winter is that one of the big issues we have in our front yard with stressing out the grass actually came from what happened in the winter and our inaction. So I'll show a short video here. This happened, I think, 2 winters ago now, and we got a ton of snow, and we had these 3 trees in our front yard, and the 2 side trees got so weighed down with snow that they leaned over. One of them, it wasn't so much of an issue. It was leaning over into the side of our yard where there were a bunch of shrubs. It wasn't really covering anything. But the other tree leaned over into the bottom half of our front yard, and all of the branches on the bottom part of that tree died. Not necessarily a huge issue in and of itself. It's not like it was blocking out too much sun or anything, but what it did do was drop all of those dead pine needles onto the lower half of my yard. And again, I'll show a picture. You can kind of see where that happened. Next to all the clover that's growing. The clover is the only thing that can compete with the pine needles, apparently. But all of the pine needles basically smothered out what little grass there was growing there in the first place. So if you don't have a very big, robust, densely packed lawn, then it's susceptible to things like this happening and completely wiping it out. So that was something that we learned. We should have been more on top of it. We didn't think about the repercussions at the time. And honestly, our front yard is not really where we focus a lot of our work. I have a couple of raspberry plants growing out there, but we don't really have food growing in our front yard. And food is really where I focus on growing things, which means just by default, I spend a heck of a lot more time in my backyard working on things than I do in my front yard. And you can tell on the neglect scale, the front yard definitely gets the most neglect. So is what it is, kind of happens naturally, and all I can do at this point is try to do things to mitigate and address it. My issue is that that's really not going to change where I spend most of my time. So that's why I planted so much mint in my front yard this year. I really want things out there that are going to manage themselves, that are going to go crazy, and all I have to do is go out there and mow. And I don't have to spend hours every year aerating it. I don't have to worry about keeping it perfectly pristine. I also don't have a goal of having this perfectly wonderful looking grass lawn. That's not a goal that I have. And that gives me a little more freedom with what I can plant out there to try to just mitigate it and make it look presentable, right? I just want it to look presentable. I don't want it to look horrid like it does right now. So if you take anything away from today is don't be like me. Don't be super lax about it and just not care, because it will become a massive problem in the future that you'll be dealing with for years. Like I have with my dandelions and my bindweed. They are just completely rampant all over my yard because of a year and a half of neglect that we had when we first moved into this house. I had a newborn. There were a lot of indoor things that we had to take care of first before we could address outside, and our lawn definitely suffered for it. So it's taken us a few years to get back into the swing of things, and we're still not all the way there. It is what it is, but moving forward, we're going to do better. All right. So thank you so much for coming along with me today, you guys. If you learned something, hit like, hit the subscribe button, and I hope I see you next time. Bye.